I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're bringing you our entire show from Salem tonight because back there it's the opening day for the 2024 legislative session. They have a lot of work to cover in just 35 days. Not very long to get all that done. They're going to be focused on two big things. One, retooling Measure 110. That's the Oregon law that decriminalized drugs. And then secondly, they're trying to figure out how to build a lot more housing in the state of Oregon, which, as you're about to hear, is a lot harder than it sounds. I talked with legislative leaders on both sides of the House. We're going to start with the Democrat, the Speaker of the House, Dan Rayfield.
Representative Gomberg.
Dan Rayfield is the Speaker of the House, a Democrat who's a lawyer from the Corvallis area. When he's not serving in the legislature, he's a partner in a law firm representing consumers against insurance companies. This is his last term. He's going to run for Attorney General. But in the meantime, as the powerful Speaker of the House, he controls what bills will come up for votes in Oregon's House sessions. If he wants something to die, it will. So his thoughts on things like Measure 110, Oregon's law that decriminalized drugs, those thoughts carry significant weight.
Do you think Measure 110's been effective?
That was one of the things in our conversations at the very beginning where there was a lot of agreement that 110 is not working. There's also broad agreement that the system before 110 wasn't working either. And so we're in this space of trying to find what is that next system that's going to help people.
And you feel it's not working?
I do not believe 110 is working.
Yeah, okay. And when we say not working, we mean not working as intended, where it would be treated as a public health issue, a lot of people would get help, addiction would go down, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't believe 110 is working as it was intended.
From what I've been reading, it seems that the Democratic majority is in somewhat of a tricky position in that the advocates who pushed for Measure 110 are not happy at all that any of those discussions are going on. How do you tread that fine line, I guess?
Yeah, I think what you're hearing right now is some of the criminal justice reform advocates, who worked to pass ballot Measure 110 are not pleased with some of the direction of the conversations. And then, like you astutely mentioned, is that there are some in the law enforcement community that would like to go even further. What our charge was to the committee was find the right policy. Your goal should be on people experiencing substance abuse and making sure that we give them the right supports and what is the right system to get them onto the path to recovery. And that has been our sole focus in the committee, and that's what we're going to continue to try and do. But at the same time, both sides need to have an avenue to be able to have their voices heard, because both of them have arguments for why they believe their approach is the right way to go.
And what about this outside threat of a ballot measure? Does that influence anything?
Again, it's very similar. You can have the threats of ballot measures, you can have strong opinions. In the legislature, what should control is proven solutions, making sure that we have a system that helps human beings that are suffering from substance abuse and families that need treatment for their loved ones. That is the challenge of the committee, and that's what we've said. You need to stay focused on that. As at the same time, listening to everybody, because if you're bringing a ballot measure, you can have wonderful ideas that should be incorporated into the process. If you're a criminal justice reform advocate, right, we should be listening there and incorporating those good ideas, and likewise from law enforcement. And so that has been the challenge of the committee, is to sort through all of those different conversations, but then stay really grounded on proven solutions to make a difference.
One thing that we hear from, as you mentioned, the police need the tools. We've heard a lot from the police side that they want a statewide law that drug use in public, just like drinking alcohol in public, needs to be outlawed. Is it a good bet that that's going to happen?
Yes, so that's one of the areas in this broad comprehensive package where there was a lot of agreement that public use is one thing that we can check off the list. The question is whether you go after public use or is possession enough to kind of encompass public use at the same time. But there's unanimity for the most part, I would say, that public use is something that will move back to making sure that that can no longer occur.
It also sounds broadly like drug use will be recriminalized at some level. Is that fair to say?
We're definitely on that track to have that conversation. Where that lands, there's a lot of different nuances in that, but we're definitely moving in that direction. It's still an active conversation in the legislature, though.
Okay, so the other big thing that the governor at least is highlighting is housing. She wants to build a lot more houses. Part of that is an interesting idea about the urban growth boundary, which we're starting to get viewers to say yay, but other viewers saying, whoa, hold on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question. Part of the question that we're grappling with in the legislature is there is a lot of buildable space within the urban growth boundaries, but cities and counties don't have the infrastructure money to be able to connect up into those spaces. So a big part of the housing package that we're looking at is let's build in the space that we already have and make sure that cities and counties have that infrastructure money to connect into those areas, which again lowers that per unit cost. So that's going to be a big focus in the housing package. Now that's something that Democrats, Republicans, whether you're a land use advocate or someone who believes that they want to expand the UGB, that's something that everyone agrees upon.
We're over on the Senate side now. They're not in session. They met earlier this morning. But with housing being such a central focus for this legislative session, we thought we'd dig into that a little bit more. And we're going to do it with Senate Leader Tim Knopp. Outside of this building, he's a lawyer who represents builders of all sorts, so he knows the subject very well. This is also his last session. He led the historic walkout last year, and so he cannot run for re-election. We had a chance to talk about housing and also Measure 110. And in the background of the interview, you're going to hear some pounding. That's just the building that's going on here at the Capitol.
Well, it's critical that we do expand the urban growth boundaries because we've been doing essentially the same thing for decades in Oregon. And what it's led to is us being behind by about 100,000 units of housing. So we need to make that up. And then you need to continue to be consistently building more to meet the demand. And if we're not going to do that, we are going to have more homelessness and we are going to have more instability in the community. So it's really important that we deal with that issue this session. That's one of the most important things in that bill.
And I think as part of that, the governor wants to set aside, if I'm not mistaken, $500 million. But I've heard others argue that maybe some of that money should be going into a rainy day fund.
Well, there is money that goes into both the rainy day fund and the education stability fund on a biennial basis.
Okay.
So those are automatic unless the legislature diverts that money. But we still have funds available that need to go for infrastructure. And honestly, the problem is way greater than $500 million. It's billions of dollars worth of infrastructure that's needed. And cities would tell you that's water, that's sewer, that's roads that are going to be critical to being able to follow through with the opportunity for more land that's developable for housing as a whole. And so
Can you explain that a little more?
Support that, sure.
You work with the home builders, so you
Do.
understand it.
Yeah.
A lot of the public won't, but I think it's very expensive for developers to lay all that infrastructure in.
Well, there's no doubt that it's very expensive. And so the cities will cause that infrastructure to happen, or they'll, through SDCs, Systems Development Charges, and those can be pretty substantial. So in Bend, you know, your building permit's going to be, with Systems Development Charges, is going to be over $50,000 just for that. Yeah, and in some metro area cities, it's comparable or even higher. And it's hard to make things affordable when your upfront costs include, you know, and then you put the land in there, and you know, lots are going, like on the low end in Bend, probably 150, 175, all the way up to, you know, $1 million for a lot. So I mean, it just varies and depends on the location. So it's hard to make something affordable when you start out with, let's say, $250,000 worth of cost right up front before you've even, you know, put a foundation or, you know, stick in the ground. And so we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to make these homes as affordable as possible for Oregonians.
How important is Measure 110 to have some changes made to that?
Well, it's critically important to Oregonians that we move from essentially a decriminalization of hard drugs, including fentanyl, to recriminalize those as a misdemeanor, which is what it used to be. But the whole goal with it is to make sure that people with addiction are getting treatment and that they're getting toward recovery. And right now, there's really no incentive for them to do that because the measure created a ticket essentially for drug possession and gave you a phone number to call to get treatment. Well,
which nobody's doing.
Almost no one's doing that. And so there's really no incentive for people with addiction to get treatment. And we know that people are coming from out of the area, out of the state, to Oregon, and are essentially taking advantage of our very lax laws as it relates to hard drugs. And it is going to be a problem, and I would say a problem that's getting worse in the future. So we need to resolve it this session.
As for his future, Tim Knopp says he's not sure. He'll be out of the legislature, but he told me he still feels the pull of public service. So it seems like a good bet that we'll see him again somewhere.
We'll be keeping an eye open for anything else big that comes up during the session, but those are two of the big ones we're really going to be focused on.